I live stream. I need to put out this little doohickey. And you can tell it's been a while, team, so it was okay. Can I ask for Matamata-Piako to open our Holy Word Karakia, if that's okay?
Ka tia kira, te mea ka mea tira kia tātou kotai nei o te karama te rā. Ko huri a mata whakaro ki ai tō tātou matanui te rangi, kei moi tātou. I runga tamata wairua tapu, e te atua ka harau ko te noa ponunga tāne, ponunga wahine. Te korepiko nei mūtua o tāku rōria tēnei ata. Te whakamoime te whakawhetara atu ki a koe me tau aro hatau manapitanga kotoa i uhia nei kirungi a mata ai te ao, te pō, te ao. Kai ni atu nei ki a koe te atua ki a toro te tauringa atu pai ki runga te kini Māori tū hei te apo, tau te perapero, tūwhitu. Nā tau anu hoki ngā kaumātu ngā koe no nei ana i ngā marae, i runga ngā kaina mahaputa no te motu. Nā tau anu hoki ngā whānui, e nohua nei raro te kapo te pauri te mate, ngā mamai, o ngā maitua e pā mai tia nei mai tātou te iwi. Apo te no te motu, te atua ka raua, kai ni atu nei ki a koe te niwa. I ni anō ki a koe te atua, tahi nei ke wairi o mata te nira. A kia whakakaha a mata whakaaro a mata kōrero, e pānaki ngā kapapa, e hore hea nei ki wea tanga te niwa. Te atua ka raua po tēnei te hiunga atu ki a koe. E rau tui taunua tapu. Kia ora.
That was beautiful, by the way, for those of us that have any kind of understanding of Te Reo Māori. That was just beautiful. So I'm not pretending to be fluent, but I understand a lot of what Matamata-Piako was saying, and it warms the heart. So in here, now to move on to the more administrative side of things. Any other things to be added to the agenda? Any declarations of interest? No. Before we move on to the confirmation of minutes, I'd just like to welcome everybody today. We feel skinny, doesn't it? I'm guessing more people will come soon. So nonetheless, welcome Renee as well. I'm not sure whether we have Claudia. Okay, excellent. Pauline and I, welcome Renee. And so thank you again. We'll move on to the first, or number 6, which is the confirmation of minutes from our last meeting on the 7th of March 2023. Does anyone have any comments to make in relation to those minutes? Otherwise, we'll move to confirm. Does anyone remember the minutes?
Flick through them. I didn't look. Yeah.
So I'm happy to move. Can I please have a second now?
A second.
All in favour say aye. Against, carried. Onto the agenda now. So item 7.1, which is the chair's update. So I've just given a brief update in relation to some of the hui that I have been to representing NPDC, predominantly with the Office of the Auditor General. The first hui I went to was in relation to fraud and corruption, and I've got a few highlights in my report. And the second thing I'll point out is in relation to a hui I went to last Friday, with Naomi Ferguson, who is the chairperson of Te Water. So very interesting hui. Long story short, these hui are for chairs of risk and assurance committees around New Zealand to go and see what's happening in different spaces. So she talked about transformational change being a change that makes a difference to the person in the street, and it's streamlined for them, not for us. If that makes any sense, and if it isn't that, then that's just improving the system that we currently have. So some interesting insights in relation to making transformational change somebody's only job, and be disciplined about your scope and learn from your choices. So there are positive and negative impacts from your choices. She also talked about the role of the Risk and Assurance Committee of being supportive but not critical. Also constantly helping the CE or the executive team being on the balcony versus in the detail. And encouraging transparency, because ultimately it's ratepayers' funding that's being utilised. And in terms of roadblocks, she talked about people might say that the system is fine as it is, but it's around talking about that the current path isn't broken, but the current path doesn't work for the future. So quite a few different insights, and one thing that people face in relation to transformational change is resistance. So just need to accept that it's going to be there, invest in the people, help them get on, keep investing, and be ruthless but not inhuman if you have to part ways. So a few little gems from her. And she was also the previous commissioner for IRD as well, so she spoke a little bit about that transformational change. And I'll point out as well that the next board is on water reform. So there are going to be quite a few people that are interested in that one. Other than that, that's my brief summary. I'm happy to take any questions. But I'm not sure if I can move my report. Probably not. So we've got Gary moving, and we've got Adrian seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Excellent. So we're on item 7.2 of the agenda, which is the annual plan 23 example update. I think we've got Niall doing this.
I don't necessarily need to speak.
All right. So the report is taken as read. We are tasked with receiving the report today. Do we have any questions from the committee in relation to the paper? I might just ask a question in terms of whether there are any themes that came from the submissions for those of us that weren't lucky enough to be in the room. I don't know if lucky is the right term.
I think there was a thought around selling assets and just wanting the rates reduced. It was quite an interesting. I think it was just highlighting the pressures of cost of living on those on fixed income.
Yeah, that was.
And how that was the thing really. But they were sort of trying to find ways for us to borrow for our groceries and sell assets and we resisted that by coming to that conclusion of applying for better off funding to target those that were whose rate rise was significantly higher because of the water's charges.
Yeah, the rubbish was also a very common thing.
Yeah, the curbside. It wasn't understood that we'd consulted on this in 2021, and I think COVID probably distorted our perhaps our quality of consultation, maybe, that people didn't engage. I don't know, but yeah, that ship had already sailed, so they didn't understand that concept either. But I in saying that, the conversations I've been having since with people, and I spoke to a group yesterday, it's just about building understanding of why we are doing what we're doing. So one conversation at a time to build understanding with our community.
I really only have two kind of notes about it. One is I put a question mark. It's like, can we buy Auckland shares in the airport? It's a way of reinvesting here. But the other thing is the curbside issue in terms of being in the country, and we out home we have private operators that we buy that service from, and whether or not that becomes an alternative to the people in town. Because everywhere I look, when I look at how much that takes up, that part of the budget is taken up by rubbish. Maybe
it's a government directive through the Waste Minimisation Act that councils are required to provide a curbside service to communities over 1,000 people, populations of over 1,000. So the drive is to increase recycling and reduce waste to landfill. So that's where it's landed. It's just building understanding with the community of how we came to this conflict. It's the biggest thing because it is a significant change for them, but it is what other councils are doing.
3 over again.
Yeah, but for us, close enough to Matamata to justify that. And I'm pretty sure they go to Malta, and they do a lot of the villages in the sense of actual villages. But yeah, there are, you know, you can use a private contractor, but it's generally for waste disposal, not for recycling. But that's why we have our transfer stations for people to take their recycling to. And we have, we're well serviced because they're really that close to our town. hopefully answers your question, Joey.
Yeah, it does, but I kept coming back to this, the first point, and all the things that we did, because you keep thinking, how can we save money? How can we do this? And I wrote down, exactly how much that means. And when you look at 16% rate rise, say, as one of the figures in the documents, and go back to the first page and have a look and think, what can we do about the increase? And and then the thought comes, this is the kind of information we need to tell people. They just think rates up, but they don't get why we're doing it. Why you're doing it.
And that service is actually of quite good value. Like if I compare a 120 bin being emptied out in the country fortnightly, that annual fee is more than what we're charging the curbside in town for the whole service. So just for a bit of perspective. Because we're doing it at, like obviously they're paying a contractor to make, they make a profit, but presumably it's fair at a fair price.
Thank you, ladies, for your comments on that and for remembering to put your microphone on. And some of us didn't. So the only comment that I'd make in relation to that, so it's a tough job for council trying to sell that level of increase and build that understanding, considering sometimes people don't want to know and want to hear the answer they want to hear versus the answer that is actually the facts in relation to the situation they're in. So good luck for you, I say. Kia ora. So can I please have a mover and a seconder for by Joe and James. Seconding. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. We're moving on to 7.3 of the agenda, which is forecasting assumptions, LTP 24 to 34. Niall, kia ora mau, already ready.
Good, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So this paper is regarding the significant forecasting assumptions for the long-term plan. As the committee will be aware, Council needs to prepare and adopt its LGP by the 1st of July 2024. A key part of that process is setting the assumptions on which the plan is based. And the key assumptions are those that focus on growth and demand and assumptions around climate change. I just lifted that guidance from Twitter. I've just set out on the paper some of the key issues around setting assumptions in terms of making sure that they are both realistic, evidence-based, and applied consistently across the plan. I've just attached, provided some detail in terms of some of those critical assumptions, the risks around those elements, and I've attached a full set of draft assumptions to your agenda. You'll see that there are still some gaps within that information. We haven't completed this yet. For example, on interest rates and things like that, we're still waiting on that data to come through. But really keen for a discussion with the committee and your feedback and direction on the assumptions that we have so far. I have, prior to this committee meeting, discussed this informally with the elected members, and we really need to move this forward so that we can confirm these for development of the LTP. So I'll leave it there. But thank you.
And go.
You go, Gary.
So I was just going to make the comment, and I raised it with council last week, that what there appears to be a huge lack of information around, or visibility actually, around where Māori sit within Matamata-Piako district. And it applies particularly to the growth, some of the growth assumptions, population assumptions, and the information that is being, I guess, used as evidence to qualify some of the assumptions that are being made. I think is hugely lacking. There is no I guess research around Māori economic potential, micro potential, the potential of public hiring strategy that we are currently working on, and what that might look like in 10 years' time for this district. So I just think there's a lot of gaps for council to be making assumptions. 24.
And are those gaps across New Zealand? It wouldn't be specific to NPDC, right?
You know, they would be right across the country. I haven't seen any council or members that I was the ability to pull together the data like this. I know through the Independent Life Statutory Board has done quite a bit in this space. But even they have got to all the impact of treaty settings, the impact of my business and the economy is, I think, in my name, potential quite powerful in the next 10, 20 years. So I just think it needs to be considered in our long term.
And how is it being considered at the moment in terms of closing that gap?
So we don't have any active work underway to necessarily address that. But what we've got in the assumptions is you'll see that there's some demographic information. So we've got the population, the age, the ethnicity, which we just need to fill in the table. So just to complete that work, there is a section about our socioeconomic sort of state within the district, but yeah, to Gary's point, we don't have the data to sort of form an assumption around the nature of the Māori economy within the district. We can just make some general statements about, you know, the key sectors within the economy and employment data and things like that, but have the data in house to be able to break that down further and sort of form a considered assumption around that. So yeah, I'm happy to take any guidance from the committee in terms of advancing that.
So I think the critical points in that is that council decisions going forward in the 10-year plan might be critical housing developments that might occur, which they are different. The strategy. That's one point. That's just one place. I think again, if our public strategy is hugely successful, as I expect it will be, it will increase our population base significantly, and also give us perhaps access to some of the economic opportunities that are in Climate and other areas being brought back into our district.
And my understanding, though, is that there's room to pivot once new information comes so that assumptions can be updated.
Yes, to a point. We do need to, yeah, it's certainly not set in concrete, but we do need to have a point in time where the assumptions are based on. There will always be more information that comes to hand later on, but we have to develop the plan on an agreed set of assumptions. So yeah, well, there is an opportunity to pivot to some extent. We do need to have a set of assumptions that the plan is built on and draw a line in the sand.
I guess that might be, it's like there's the short term, the medium term and the long term, and perhaps in the short term, it's still in a developing phase, but with this long term plan, perhaps in 3 years' time when we come to do the next one, there would need to be some information. I think that's probably the target, is that there be information perhaps available for the next long term plan, because we may not, we could make a statement about it in this one, perhaps, on the premise that they're, you know, that we'll be looking for some information in the coming years. Would be like, it's hard to, like you said, there's no information, but at the same time acknowledging that what Papakainga could do, even for our infrastructure and our services, you know, our community facilities and for even the wider around schools, you know, in our population. So it will be interesting to understand that more closely. Like I think Gary's raised it very well.
Sorry about that. Gary, on the Papakainga side of things, you're talking about, you know, obviously the flux of people potentially coming. What information do you have about, I suppose, you know, you're talking to iwi and stuff in terms of, hey, if we get this off the ground, you know, the demand will be X, Y, Z. I mean, that, you know, in terms of, I suppose my point is what information are you getting that potentially you can feed to us as well?
So I currently work in a role that's around, that's called Play for Pirite, which is around working with marae throughout the district around creating, well, capturing dreams and aspirations. And I create those documents to provide so that our marae can access the greater resources to grow their, I guess, their potential. So I work with marae, with whānau upland iwi at a marae level to capture dreams and aspirations, and being able to come home to live features of all the 50 odd marae development plans that I've created. It features in the top 3 of all those plans. So our people definitely aspire to come home. It's the opportunity for them to come home is the critical part, and for many it's about being able to get through council processes just to have a house. So our policy is going to break a lot of that down, and it's going to make it much easier. So that's the potential, that's the aspiration. How it manifests itself is you know, who knows, but it is that potential. And when we look at some of the supports that we've had, Pine Order here to give a delivery to us, you know, the ability, once council breaks down its rules, then Pine Order and TPK and others are able to support our families to come home and live. And then it becomes, well, for me, it's a reality. So, but if I might add one more point, the point for me as the Mighty Ward councillor is that technically I'm here for 6 years. There's no certainty that the Mighty Wards will even exist in 6 years' time. So for me, it's about embedding the right information in the right places that's going to influence decisions going a lot longer after I'm gone. So, good.
Oh, sorry. There's some critical parameters I think that need to be laid down for not just Papapainga, but the whole information set in regards to Māori development. And I know that when I did some work for HOA, actually, just recently we stopped because what the expectation from one national organisation for that particular organisation to set up and be ready for their next project was quite different to somewhere else where they put in specialists and critical data and all these tools that they gave one area and they said do this, and then they gave it to another area and they said this is what you have to do, but with no resourcing. And I think when I look at just the whole way through the document and reading it, I think there are pathways that haven't been set up. You know, like if the only thing that NAL does was set out what kind of parameters that they work in and that they can take on Papapainga, but they can take on this and they can take on industry, and then they can work with treaty claims and what's happening. That's the kind of framework that I think we need to, well, not us, Donna, need to address in order to, so that we get some kind of base, because it's really hard. For it'll come down to either the council or whoever to choose this is the area we look at now. But that evidence-based information for every area is critical to making sure that we make decisions that will have an impact on our population and indeed Māori people as well. And, you know, it might be the Papapainga area that we choose first within the council to look at. But I can't help reading through when I was reading through all the documents, thank you for the attachments, to see that, gosh, we haven't done anything about this, or where is this sitting in relation to this, or who's going to do this work? You know, that's the other thing about what do we put on our council when we think, and I mean that, you know, the permanent staff, so who's going to do that? And because it is a feature and we don't have the specialists in the area, we're lucky that we have Gary, who has an insight into working with not only the national government, but being able to put some of those areas for us. But who's going to do it? And I don't want it half done. I don't want Patuora to say to me, oh yeah, we put it over there, but we're not giving it to you yet until you prove that. I'm thinking, hang on, you send out a public health specialist to do this work over here, we are entitled to the same kind of resourcing. So my thought to Niall's team or whoever's team that's going to do this is we can set up the perimeters, but then we need to have access to the specialists to come in, and how is that not impacting, or how does it impact on permanent staff within the council?
Yeah, Madam Chair, from an operational perspective, I just wanted to reassure the committee that as part of the organisational review, I've made contact. I am in the process of making contact. I've already made contact with one of them, the EB Trust chief executives, because I think in order for me and the organisation to best advise council that having that operational connection that can potentially provide us with information and commentary that will help inform the council policy debate. So I just wanted to emphasise that I'm in the process of strengthening those operational ties and having processes that allow them to provide directly updated information on what they're doing in the Maori economy and other issues that they're having to address. So I just thought that might be helpful.
And Renee, I might ask you, because our appointed auditor is there to express the view on the assumptions. So have you seen anything across New Zealand in this space that we could use in relation to our assumptions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I haven't. I can do a little bit of research around that. We do have regular updates with the LTP team, and we can put that as one of the discussion points on our agenda, just to keep it top of mind as we go through the process.
Thank you, and thank you for those comments, because ultimately these are mokopuna decisions, right? So to Matua Gary's point, it's around the legacy that we leave for the future. So thank you for talking about that. And also keeping in mind from a Waikato Taonui perspective, it's the relativity clause kicked in this year as a result of new settlements, and that means that more funding goes towards every single Waikato Taonui marae. So that's a lot of funding that's coming into the district. So Niall, I think you're hearing that in relation to the provision of feedback, what the committee would like to see incorporated into those assumptions. Okay.
I'll just add a couple more points. I think LTNC, I said that the Waikato workshop in December is keen to some of this stuff. Maybe there's some advocacy that we can collectively do to bring that on to help us with this, because it doesn't affect the rest of the district of the country. It's not being done.
Chair, just wondering, would it be possible just to go through the assumptions? I know there's quite a number of them, obviously. We don't need to obviously discuss every one unless there's an appetite to do so, but and just take any feedback that you might have on. It's just sort of, that direction against each of the assumptions that we have, or if there are additional assumptions that need to be disclosed.
I'd ask it this way. Other than the point that's been raised by Matua Gary, is there anything else that people are missing?
No, I think there are huge gaps, and maybe you and I should sit down and have a discussion about some. Because there's probably too many that I would raise.
I think we could spend all day doing this, to be fair, and if that conversation is happening today, I'm happy to be part of it in relation to line by line. Because I have feedback too, but I think we could be here for hours. Yeah. So my feedback is not necessarily in terms of what's missing, it's in terms of tightening up what we have that is there.
I would just say that these are quite important and fundamental to the long-term plan, and obviously something that New Zealand will have a scrutiny over. So that we make them as robust as we can.
feel it's not appropriate to do it now.
We're here, it's still.
Yeah,
I think we should
I think we're not
I
like
think-
them.
Yeah, well, you know, like we might be able to, it might be brief, but I think doing our due diligence here now as a risk and insurance committee would be appropriate.
Thank you, Mary.
So
Unfortunately, it just looks like, I would just say that appears to be a bit of a typo. So the first page appears to be assumption 11, but actually really the first page is the contents page, which is the introduction, which sets out all of the assumptions and the effects.
I'll just point out my screen's not that, and so I will catch up. So, did you want to go through the first one and then call out what that is and then ask some comments?
Sure. So I'm just on page 7 of the attachment, which is the first assumptions on population and housing projections and locations. So the assumption is that council's population and household growth will align with the future-proof projections. So those future-proof projections have been developed for the Hamilton, Waipa and Waikato district, and council has now joined that future-proof initiative. So we're essentially relying on the population projections that are done through what was formerly NIDIA, based at Waikato University. In terms of the age assumptions, we're leaning on the Stats New Zealand age projections, and essentially the key assumption is that our population will continue to age, and we will start to see the population that is the portion of the population that's over 65 will continue to rise, and that will have an impact on the services that the district offers.
if I can just comment on that one.
Sure.
Again, back to the population policy. This is the only district that has a unique district-wide policy, and so it will definitely have an impact in 3 to 5, 10 years.
And if I move to the next one, which is assumption 3, which is demographic changes as well in relation to ethnicity. So the assumption is that our ethnic profile will continue to change. We will continue to see an increase in the Māori, Pacific and Asian population and a decline in some of the other population areas. And essentially, again, just drawing on Stats New Zealand projections over time. And internal migration of people within New Zealand will also shift that.
Sorry, is it okay for me just to keep
Oh,
sure. The assumption there, all of these assumptions are based on urban population growth. Whereas the Papakainga again takes us back to rural population growth rather than, what might be seen as farming houses and other types of development. So that's the only difference that I would have to say there, is that our growth will be in the rural spaces.
It's actually a really good point because it's not being reflected, has it? It always talks about rural declining and with trees being planted and whatnot. That's a very, very valid point looking long.
It also comes up when we start looking at land use. Because the potential of Papakainga again changes the way land will be used in future, Māori land anyway. And we know that's quite a significant area for our district.
So just to clarify, so when we're talking about the population in terms of ethnicity and age profile, we're just looking at, it's based on census data. So it's taking the whole district, urban and rural, and just, looking at trends over time. Like with any population, it's based on historical trends and just projecting out. So, we're seeing an aging profile over time and our population steadily increasing. But you're absolutely right, that population can shift within the district. So you might see more growth in the rural area. And it might shift to actually how that population growth is dispersed in terms of location.
Again, and sorry to keep chipping, but the work that I do in the health space, we know that ethnicity count is poor. And so we are hoping to see a better outcome out of this census campaign. But there are a number of issues that absolutely challenge some of those
And I do appreciate that. And so you'll see there that we've said, we've disclosed those risks. So the risk our economic profile might deviate from the Stats New Zealand projections. And our mitigation is to monitor our ethnic composition over time. So yeah, that's just something that we've suggested that we could do to keep an eye on things. In terms of the assumption 4, the socio-economic status of the district, so we're drawing on the deprivation index that's been quite well established for that. We've got our employment projections, so assumption 5, and we have an economic profile for the district that breaks down the kind of the key economic sectors and the employment associated with that. I won't go through all of the assumption 6, which is in relation to climate change, but you'll see that we have put quite a bit more detail in here than we have in our current set of assumptions in the long-term plan. So yeah, we've disclosed some assumptions around expecting to see higher temperatures, increased level of dry days and droughts, fire weather, flooding, and we're potentially drawn on regional council data for that and some of our own in-house information.
That's nice. We might pause there.
Oh, sure.
We've got a comment from that one.
Yeah, I'll just go back to the employment projections and reflecting that we're part of Future Proof. And
Number 5.
yeah, number 5, sorry. Just the reflection that we're on part of Future Proof and with Morrinsville connected to Hamilton, but also Matamata connected to Tauranga. And I guess, yeah, there's a bit of an unknown there, but I think we do need to tag that as their way of capturing future proof in that.
I would just make the comment that it is very difficult to anything that we like. A lot of these projections are based on historical trends data,
Yeah.
so we are trying to think of something speculative that might happen. It's quite difficult to make an assumption about that. You know, it's like things that we might know, but how do we evidence that that we might see that change in the future? So on what basis can we say that, you know, there's linkages and what might that actually do in terms of employment within the district is a bit of a challenge. But yeah, I appreciate that we can certainly add a note that, you know, we certainly are part of that Future Proof collective and you know, they do have some data around that.
Just on a generic point, no, in relation to previous years when comments have been asked for from council or elected members, have there been any significant shifts that have come through that could lead us to a different direction? Can be asked in a different way. Have you received any feedback that has added different assumptions over the years from this space?
Nothing immediately springs to mind. That could be the case. That was, of course, a few years ago that we developed the last set of assumptions for the LTP.
And
I think the key one was around population and has certainly been discussed quite robustly around the council table. And about, you know, for example, whether we should be on a, you know, on a medium growth trajectory or a higher growth profile for the district, and where those assumptions, you know, what the right level of assumption is. So that's certainly been something we've looked into, and as the district has, you know, as we've developed district plan changes, we've, you know, been updating our population projections to reflect, you know, how that growth is looking. So probably that one has been a focus.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. And anything from the appointed auditors that has changed what we've done in this space, I think?
In terms of the last long-term plan, nothing that I can immediately recall.
Okay.
I would just say, make a general comment that I think, from my perspective, the message that we're getting is the assumptions around climate change, you know, are increasing our focus. So, yeah, hopefully we've starting to reflect that, in this drafted set of assumptions.
Excellent. So we'll go back to number 6, climate change, because it is so significant. Any comments? I'll just give some feedback that it's good to see more robust information going into there. I mean, that sometimes you must feel like your crystal ball gazing, but it's good to see that it's reflected and that it is important. So over to you now.
Cool. So skip from the climate change one, and if I go to assumption 7, we need to do a little bit more data here. This was around liquefaction, and just looking at what sources of information we have that. You'll see there assumption 9 on land use changes. This really supports the population one around where we're seeing that population growth on the periphery of our existing urban towns, so in Morrisville, Matamata and Te Aroha. As it's noted there, we've got a district plan change that has provided for further Papakainga development, so we're assuming that we will see that come to fruition. And the housing and business assessment has been completed for the district. So yeah, quite a number of stuff. We've sort of packaged a number of elements into that land use change information, and we're leaning on the land use data that's been collated by the Future Proof Group as well. So yeah, just trying to integrate that.
No, we with the land use stuff. I mean, this was done, I guess, before the sensitive soils, class 1 and 2 and 3 national policy statement on there on restricted land use around those, and I see that we've got the strong input and collaboration with WRC, and of course we're talking about that with the flood zone stuff as well. So I think we've got some real, outside of what we've already put into a district plans, I think we've got some real challenges around this space. Don't know if October the 14th changes anything, I'm not sure, but super, a Papakainga, that's fine. That's on Māori land, so that's fine. But I think we've got some real issues coming. This is a bit that scares me. Yeah, well, scares me, doesn't scare me, but it's it's going to be super challenging. Because you're probably wearing it, because I think is it 66% of our land's 1, 2 and 3, isn't it? So unless we're relocating Morrisville to the Taonei Hills or something, I'm not sure if that's where we want to go, but it's challenging.
Are you comfortable that the assumption captures?
I mean, we've got our what we did, I suppose, all the way back in Plan Change 47 in terms of making sure there was enough land available for obviously residential, commercial, industrial, etc. I mean, but certainly Morrisville and Te Aroha in particular, I mean, we've got struggling to find enough industrial commercial land, and new policy statements don't help us. So anything that's been zoned is fine, because it's zoned and that's done. But it's, I guess, so those assumptions we're probably fine for a wee while, but I can just see some real issues coming at us because of who we are, where we are.
So just on that first point, so if you look at the under assumptions, so we've said that driven by policy change at the national and local government level, with the growth on the periphery of our existing towns will decrease. Yeah. So what we're seeing now is we're seeing that that further rezoning into residential land on the edge of our towns, but we're stating that will decrease, and effectively picking up on the national policy statement on highly productive land and that more kind of infilling and of existing urban areas, and that's noted as a risk that we might see that at a different rate. So have you any guidance from the committee in terms of how we've graded assumption?
Can I just talk on that, Niall, please? When we start talking about densities, that's all very well with residential, but when it comes to the commercial and industrial, and that's what James was mentioning, you don't double decker industrial and commercial. So there will be a need to ensure we have adequate zoning for that in the future.
Thank you, Bruce. Kevin's been waiting a while.
I agree. I mean, industrial is a huge issue for all three towns, and we need to be proactive with that. The Papakainga thing it's an unknown at the moment. we don't know where it's going to be, how big it's going to be, how much we're taking up. I'd be really, really interested in finding that out because it's going to make a huge difference to places like Waharoa and just the economic opportunities that will bring. But yeah, this highly productive land and preventing basically urban sprawl in our area is huge, and we need to make some assumptions on how we're going to do that because infill is not going to be able to be continuing for forever. We've got to sprawl at some stage, and it'll be really interesting this Kaukara appeal for the industrial land. Because if we can't get that off the ground, then I don't see how you can get anything off the ground, really.
Probably the only comment I'd make, and it sort of crosses over into climate change, is with infill and the impact on our infrastructure. Because when you infill, there's less grass, you know, like the whole drainage, the pressure on your infrastructure because you're doubling up is also something that needs to be considered, and it's infrastructure for those properties, but it's infrastructure for our stormwater as well, and the impact on that. So it's sort of a bit of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, we also made a decision at one point that you don't have to have off-road parking for vehicles, so that's going to be another one.
That's the NVSUD for us being tier 3.
I'm just going to make the comment that under the effects for assumption 9, housing developments require supporting infrastructure. I think the fact that we're looking at the effects from an urban perspective again doesn't take into account the requirements of rural developments to provide their own wastewater systems and infrastructure.
Niall, do you need something more specific or more concrete? Or do any of the committee members have any specific?
The only thing I would just say is that this assumption 9 is about housing growth. So anything to do with industrial and commercial is not captured in this assumption. If there's a need or feeling that we should have a separate assumption to address, you know, industrial and commercial elements, that's fine. This one wasn't intended to capture that. Hence the kind of in brackets, just housing only. But I take the point about that. When you look at that effect there, it is effectively talking about, you know, the costs of council in terms of provision of infrastructure and how that's addressed through development contributions and so on. Yep, we can certainly make the acknowledgement that, you know, in rural areas that are unserviced.
Yes, you need a separate assumption for that and for industrial commercial as well, probably.
Yeah, because of the link with housing and people are moving here, there needs to be jobs. So,
Correct.
You know, you can't look at one thing in isolation. While there's an ageing population, there still has to be jobs too.
We kind of constricted with the 10-year/30-year forward look as well, and the fact that we have to be able, if we designate something, zone something for a certain purpose, we have to be pretty damn confident we're going to use it in 10 years. Or 30 perhaps. But
the only thing I would just add, and I don't disagree at all with that point, is just that, you know, these assumptions are intended to be the ones that have significant, you know, that are by nature significant. So we just need to be careful that we don't have to disclose so many assumptions that might be just smaller in nature. Yeah, and what is the impact on the council and its, you know, service delivery over the next 10 to 30 years? If it's, you know, of a small nature, you know, is it a significant assumption that we need to make in the plan? So it's just, you know, just something that you know, just so then we've got number 10, which is local government reform. Again, there's certainly some unknowns in this respect. You'll note there under the assumption, we're assuming that the council role and what we currently do in terms of our core functions will remain the same. We note there that the review into the future of local government has been published. I understand the final report from the future of local government panel is due later this month, so we will update that assumption once that comes through. Separately, there is an assumption around resource management reform, but this is just the broad reform relating to local government. Yeah, so we've got that there. In terms of the next one, which is service delivery, so we're assuming that our service delivery will remain and continue except where we've specifically stated that we're doing something differently in the LTP. Inflationary costs, so assumption 13, we will add those details. We generally rely on Burl to provide that. And then if I go down to assumption 15 and 16, which is our interest rates for our borrowings, and again, we will update that in due course. And number 17, which is our development contributions, that effectively we're relying on those development contribution income to contribute to the capital costs of infrastructure. Number 18, around the Waikikatahi transport funding. Number 20, in terms of the ownership of water infrastructure assets, it's actually quite challenging at the moment, given the space that we are in, and quite difficult to make an assumption on. So what I've said is that MPDC will not be retaining ownership of the three water assets from the 1st of July 2026. We do note that the legislation currently as enacted will transfer that on the 1st of July 2024, but government has signalled that that is now going to be delayed pending, further legislation. So yeah, what we've said is effectively our mitigation is that the projects contained in the plan have been based on the basis that the new entity will take over service from the 1st of July 2026, but it could potentially be earlier.
Just a point of clarification, does that mean that if we're not retaining those, it will the environment will go back to before the Three Waters the discussion started?
Right. So that would remain the status quo?
No, not necessarily. And that's probably the challenge, that we don't have policies even at this point. Yeah. We don't have it, and the administration changes in October. There's still not, in my opinion, an absolute certainty as to what will be pursued. And I know the General is working on some guidance with respect to how we deal with that within our LTPs. I'm not sure when that guidance is coming out. Through you, Madam Chair, as Renee know that one. Unfortunately, I don't know a deadline date.
So given that discussion, are we comfortable with the way that that assumption's been framed? So we do have recognised a high level of uncertainty there, and the effect, could be quite significant.
Yeah, I think you've done a good job there. I think you're doing a great job taking us through. I am also mindful of time, so maybe we can go number, title, and then if there are any comments.
Sure. Okay, so number 21, COVID-19 recovery. Number 22, the legislative and regulatory environment. 23 is the funding available for new assets and replacement of our existing assets. 24 is asset life cycles and depreciation methods, and we'll add the schedule of asset lives and so on. That continues.
Did roading change when they did the extra heavies? Did we change the
65 tonnes?
Yeah.
They still had to have designated routes that required. There wasn't a general blanket 65 tonnes.
Certainly made a difference to the road qualities, that's for sure. Especially when they got to turn a corner.
So I skip down to number 24, which is revaluation of assets. and number 25, which is our environmental standards around our resource consent requirements, in particular for our water and wastewater and so on, where we rely on those consents and renewals. Number 26 is our weather tight home settlements and the claims around that. Number 27 is our levels of service, maintaining those in the LTP. 28 is around budget costs. Our vested assets at 29. And civil defence emergency. This also ties back into that climate change one around how prepared we are for natural disaster or civil defence emergency. 31, our credit position. 32 is disruptive technologies and how that might impact on council.
Just on that one, I'm glad to see that features. I'm not a young, so I know that's going to have a huge impact on us in the future. So
that is, I would say that is a new assumption. We have not previously disclosed that in the current long-term plan. The staff and resourcing, this has certainly been a challenge in some areas within the council. So we've made an assumption on in that regard. And 34 is the resourcing from our external suppliers. 35 is the delivery of our capital program. And then there's a separate paper which talks about our population projection. So I won't go through that in any detail, but yeah, that's the next attachment in your agenda.
Awesome, thank you. Any other comments from the committee members in the room or online? Otherwise, I'll take us to the recommendation.
Can I just ask a couple of probably not questions? The first thing is the influence that council has on growth within our region. What is it? Like, could you stem the growth of the population by either policy or not allowing building consents or whatever? That's one question. And the second one is I went through this looking at the socioeconomics, but for all the areas. And again, I have to say that it always comes to mind that there is a parallel running in terms of infrastructure where we can grow as much as we like, but if we do not have the services to support it, I'm thinking health, education, social welfare, all those kinds of services, then how well are we as a community after we've gone through some of these assumptions, but not run the other kind of look at how are we supporting this? And that's outside the council. It's outside the council, but they work in parallel. So we don't have enough. If you have tried, it takes 3 weeks to get into a doctor. The population is aging. The way in which so you should be using the pharmacists more, you should be using lots of things more. Look at what's happening with the teachers through the country. And even though the primary teachers have just signed off on their, like the whole thing, do we have enough people to support the infrastructure or these assumptions? Or even the expertise, and are we getting them are we dragging on other areas to get those people into our area? When in fact we state that it's hard enough to run the council business, well, let alone the business of the growth and development of the region.
In theory, Madam Chair, the proposed changes to the RMA, one aspect of which is the development of what's known as a spatial plan, is in theory meant to draw together all those issues when deciding on forward planning. At the moment, the RMA is primarily focused on development proposals, which are independent of those wider considerations. But the idea of spatial planning, which Auckland City was required to go through as part of their amalgamation, have created a spatial plan, and now the government and its changes is proposing that spatial plan process be extended out across the country. So in theory, that matter is that concern, and a valid concern, is hopefully to be addressed.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, I'll ask for a mover and a seconder, please. That's what Gary moving. Given seconding, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Excellent. Thank you, Noel, for that. And please say, item 8.1, the adoption of the annual report, and they will be joining us from this cordial too, and potentially Nadia. We'll see how it goes.
I think briefly introduce this. So this report addresses the adoption of the recent adoption of the 21-22 annual report. We've attached here a number of items related to this. The annual report and the summary document, the audit opinion, the warrant of fitness, the letter of representation signed by the Mayor and CE, the misstatement schedule that arose out of the audit work, the independent auditor's report, Council has adopted the annual report now, formally adopted that, and it has been published. We did have, just due to the timing of that, we did have a discussion with the chair of the committee just prior to that to look at this. But yeah, unfortunately, there wasn't a committee meeting where we formally reviewed the annual report prior to its adoption. So hence we are bringing this report today, so to allow any discussion.
And I'll just add that Fire Joey was at that hui as well. So thank you for giving up everyone's time over. I think it was a long weekend. But nonetheless, any comments from the committee in relation to the paper presented?
I just have just a question just around the financials, Don, with the personnel costs and the annual leave accruing, how are we getting on with getting staff to take their leave, or are we paying out, gonna bite bullet and pay out some leave? Is it worsening? Like, I know with COVID and that, it sort of changed things a little bit. So is it building? Just trying to understand the significance of it.
So we are very conscious of that issue. We can't. It's not technically possible to ask staff to be paid out. They have to
request it.
Request it. But there'll certainly be sympathetic to people who have accrued quite a bit of annual leave to be paid out in accordance with the legal guidance. I just can't remember the latest figures. Manai, can you remember what the latest figures from Tracy were around annual leave?
I haven't seen those.
Yeah,
that's all right. I think the thing is, I'm just highlighting that it's a liability on our books.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we need to encourage our staff to take time off, and because they are owed it. I guess the challenge then is also the workload.
Yeah, they're two opposing forces.
Yeah, it's competing, quite a challenge. So I just, I flagged that, but I guess it's just even if it's take a few long weekends and take the odd day off, it's just
it's certainly a message we keep emphasising to our managers,
because we really don't want it to build.
And the trouble is it builds naturally anyway from salary increases, some of which will be significant. Just as a heads up, talking about this
wage inflation,
and the latest staff salary surveys, there are certainly clearly some market forces at play, and the liability goes up just naturally as a result of that. But I know it's something that Rena and her team look at and will comment on quite rightly, and we're conscious of it and try to work and encourage staff to take their leave.
Yeah, every business, eh?
Yeah. And I guess the other question is just around the water activity. Obviously, this was 21-22, and now we're in 22, well, completing 22-23 in a couple of weeks. So our water activity is under pressure again. And I guess the challenge for us is how we're going for the 12 months ahead, is whether it's going to be worse again or whether it's going to settle a little bit with the regulator and that maybe the costs might settle this year going forward to next year.
Well, council has obviously taken a significant decision in increasing its operational revenue budget in that area. Quite a bit of the cost in the current year, I think approximately something just over $1 million is what I would what we deem to be one-off costs. You know, some regulatory compliance issues that we've had to address. But it's still, there's still an element of the unknown in terms of compliance and demand and information that we need to supply to our regulator, the Matamata-Piako in particular, who are finding their way.
And of course, they're going to pass their charges back, aren't they?
Yep.
So there's another cost. You know, that's just understanding the risks
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
what we're providing here going forward. Like this is a snapshot.
Certainly, and over the next, certainly over the next couple of years, 2 or 3 years, there's quite a bit of work to be undertaken. Now, I think a lot of it will be able to be capitalised, but we've got several significant consents coming up for renewal. There's having to be quite a degree of work in that space as well.
Leah, do you have any comment in relation to moving forward for the next audit? I note in the packet has the annual report 22-23 timeline, which seems quite tight. So I'm just mindful of the well-being of the team on both sides. Not that there are sides, just in relation to a smooth process for the next audit ahead. Any feedback that you'd like from the committee in relation to that?
I guess we've ordered to develop a plan that allows us, we know that we can't get our valuations completed, the valuers are under pressure. I think every council must be going out for valuations, so we've come up with a plan that we can completely put over visits going forward with the valuations and the review process. So that's, from my perspective, it's good because we can get a lot of the work done early on, so we're not trying to do it at Christmas time. So that's pretty good from my perspective. Unless we read that, we can be waiting till we get all ready to make starts. So positive.
Thank you. I don't need to comment on that. And I'm also mindful that when we have our next Risk and Assurance Committee on the 12th of September, that's during the time that the final audit has actually been conducted. We're just trying to assess what level of assurance can be provided by the Risk and Assurance Committee if that process is underway.
Just better raise, thank you.
Okay.
I think I can just, through the chair, just maybe comment that, so in agreement with what Lania said, we've worked out a time schedule that looks a little bit different than in the past. So we've added what we call a pre-final audit. So we usually have a planning visit, an interim visit, and final, but we've added a pre-final visit. We've also agreed on exactly what we're going to look at which stage, hoping that will help us to get it over the line. Just noting again with the PPE section, that is our highest risk area. It's our highest area of focus again this year. And you know, that is the information that we are going to receive last due to the timing of the valuation reports. I just want to note that because that was the little trip up point for the previous version. Our focus is on the 23J at the moment. So the team started today with the interim visits. So it's at this point we are moving along and our focus is on the 23J. Thank you.
Any other comments? Otherwise, I might go back to the recommendation, which is likely to receive the report. They have a mover and a seconder. We have James moving and we have Kevin secondary. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Kia ora. We are now moving on to 8.2, draft report to council on the audit for the year 30 June 2022. So welcome to Yania and also Maya.
So the draft audit report, we got that on the 17th of May. Unfortunately, when we bring these things to a committee meeting, normally we'd want to have had an opportunity to discuss it with audit, gather all our findings and put our management comments in there, but we're just not at that point at this stage. So, but I was obviously conscious of the fact that we don't have another meeting for several months yet, so I wanted to get something in front of you. So the plan at this point is that we will provide our combined comments back to audit. We'll work through it. I had some, I guess, some issues just looking at the raw document with the sort of priority ratings that have been applied. We had a chance to have a quick meeting with audit on Friday, and one thing I hadn't appreciated that some of their ratings in the report around urgency were sort of related to the timing, the fact that our next audit is coming up. So they were sort of, I guess, urgent because of the timing factor as opposed to the risk factor. So that's something we want to go back and sort of clarify and maybe put, hopefully get some more context put into the report. But yeah, that was my comment. So I guess the idea is that once we get that report finalised, we won't wait till the next agenda to get it out to you. We'll circulate it at that point.
Thank you. And thank you for giving us the context in relation to the report. It helps when you're reviewing to know that there's more to happen, but do appreciate the provision of the report just to provide transparency considering the time between meetings. So on that, do we have any questions from the committee in relation to the report?
Yeah, I'm just frustrated. The timing, but anyway, I've got to get over it.
Yes. I'm also looking forward to what the result of the review from Audit New Zealand and the Auditor General will look like in relation to the fees that will be charged across New Zealand moving forward, and hoping that there's a lot being done on the audit side in relation to streamlining processes, strong onboarding. We always complain about it every single time, but I already got asked that question. Yeah, just different things like this that can add to the frustration levels. So I think we'll appreciate that the previous audit is done and dusted. We'll go forward in a positive frame, and I look forward to seeing the next iteration of the report that's presented with comments from management. I might ask, is there anything that you would like from the Risk and Assurance Committee to add value in relation to that process? I would say I do agree with you in terms of providing the context, and if we don't think it is urgent or should be reclassified as necessary or something like that, then this is our opportunity to actually make those comments now and get that sorted before we invest a lot of resource into prioritising recommendations that might not be as urgent as we think. Sorry,
yeah, I guess what I'm going to suggest to audit is the maybe the recommendations could be split into what is urgent given the timeframes and what is urgent because it is a significant risk to council.
Yes, I agree that it should be on the risk base versus the timeline 100%. And also, just for the context of the committee, it's good to see the previous recommendations listed. We'd also like to see a prioritisation lens of those recommendations starting to be closed and have those recommendations come back to the committee for context in terms of where we're at. versus every year we see them. It would be nice to have them coming through more regularly.
Yeah, I intend to do that as a standing item going forward, and now we have another internal audit report as well, so those things could all be sort of combined as a standing item for the committee.
Thank you. It really helps with our assurance framework and providing assurance to the council that those things are being looked at.
Can I just add one comment, Chair? Just in terms of looking ahead, you will note that in the report from audit, the comments on the PVE FRS 48 standard, and this is something that has been really emphasised to council that there will need to be additional disclosures and additional information provided in our upcoming annual report to address that standard. There is also work that we need to do in our long-term plan to address that standard as well, in terms of how we set our performance measures and targets, and how we form that, and the judgments we use around that. So that's something that we are actively working on, both as part of the annual report, but also in terms of our long-term plan preparation.
I'd just like to congratulate the team in relation to last year and then this year moving forward as well. So, Renee, I might leave it for you for final comments, and then we'll move to close out this report.
Thank you. I don't have any specific comments, just as Lania said, this is just a draft document. We still need to sit down and work through everything. So yes, nothing specific.
Okay, I'm happy to move the report. Can I have a second, please? Muscle Gary seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Okay, it's carried. Thank you. One final and quick item on the agenda, which is 8.3, the Food Act 2014 quality or QMS recognition approval.
Madam Chair, I just, Ali Van Kuyku will present this. It just shot off for a minute, so if you would like to break the tea, and we can do it straight after.
I just want to ask a quick question. Are there any comments on this report?
Hang on, she might just walked in. She just walked in.
Do we give any comments on this particular report?
I think it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
I think
I have no comments.
Staff did a pretty good job. Happy. We're just saying we haven't got a lot to say about it.
No, hopefully it's nice and simple.
Yeah,
it is.
It is, thank you. So based on that, thank you for the work that has been done. I would like to put to the committee that we receive the draft report. Can I have a mover?
I'll move.
By Joanne moving, and seconder. Kevin. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Okay, it's carried.
You didn't have anything to say.
No, pretty much it was just following up on my last report, which was in April, just showing that we've closed it off.
Perfect. Thanks, Ellie.
Thank you very much for that.
Send you coffee and get cold.
Thank you, Renee, for joining us. It's time for morning tea. Bruce, I brought my laptops, so you're going to miss out on those. And see you Excellent. Thank you, Bruce. 8.4, Building Control Authority, IN's Assessment 2023. Over to you, Dennis, and welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would also just like to introduce Daniel Kruger, our Building Control Manager, and Sarah Jones, who does quality stuff for the building area. So I guess what I would start off with this is, this assessment was our regular 2-yearly one. The previous 2-yearly one went badly for us, and we had a special assessment and followed on. And so then this came to this one, and you'll see from this we're talking about 5 GNC. So I think it's been an excellent result from where we were 2 years ago. And so I just thought that it'd be good to bring Daniel and Sarah along. One of the things we did after that poor one 2 years ago was to set Sarah in place as the quality control person. So that's helped us get on the straight and narrow and work along and made it excellent. So it's probably if Daniel just wants to make a few comments about it, and then we can respond to any questions you might have.
So as you will see that we had 2 serious non-compliances and 3 general non-compliances. To my mind, it's from where we were 2 years ago, 31 general non-compliances and 10 serious non-compliances. It's a huge improvement. I also think that with Sarah coming on board, it made my life a lot easier, to be quite honest, because I mean, Sarah worked for New World as a quality person, and they've achieved high honours at the time. Saying that, also the cluster group, the way that they are doing audits nowadays is totally different from what they've done 2 years ago. And they're not only just auditing the process, they're also going to start doing the implementation of it as well. So if there's anything from your viewpoint, Sarah, that you want to add, please.
If I could just add, when they talk about serious non-compliance, it's a bit concerning. This is serious. They were serious non-compliances because they were things that had happened 2 years ago that still hadn't been rectified this year. And of course, one of those was getting building consents done within 20 working days, 100%. And I don't think there's a council in New Zealand that's met that. And so again, we weren't meeting that 100%. But Daniel, the last 3 months, we've been at 100%, and we look like we're staying there now, so that's good. The other serious non-compliance was around some compliance schedules, which is a format for putting fixtures in buildings and stuff, and that was a confusion around how the reports were written and whatnot. So that came through as well. So I think the thing that I would really point out to is at the middle of the second page, they also noted there were no serious concerns about the BCA's technical output. And so what I would say is that from a BCA point of view, we are doing very well. There are just some bits around like the 100% and so on that have been causing issues.
I just want to add to 100% that INS came to the conclusion that if we were above 95%, they would have been happy with it. When I took over 2 years ago, we were sitting at 70%. And then we moved up to 88%, but because of and that was over the 2 years, the 88% over the last period before I came was better, and so they went on the overall rating and not the actual what it was at the time.
And that was my frustration. They just took the 2 years and they came up with an average over the 2 years. When I said to them, why aren't you looking at whether it's improving and just say whether you think it's improving, and that's good. But no, you just take the 2 years and bang. So anyway, as I say, I think it's been an excellent result, and I congratulate Daniel and Sarah for the work that they've done on bringing it to this level.
We also had a email from INS yesterday where they've actually complimented the way that the whole unit actually participated and the way of behaving around them at the time, that there was no conflict or anything like that at the time. And I mean, personally, I believe that that's the way it should be, we should not be conflict, because I don't believe that you resolve anything by doing that. But yes, so yeah, I'm personally very pleased with it as well.
And now all of the GNCs have been signed off. The last one got signed off yesterday.
Yes.
So everything's cleared now, finalised and finished.
Awesome, thank you. And I think that's probably going to answer some of the questions that may have come up. So I appreciate the update. I think Joanne's got a question.
Madam Chair, I was cheering when Dennis and Daniel came in and talked about these reports. And I have to say that even though it comes up how Irons wrote the report, when you look at the conditions that they were trying to meet with lack of staff and what was happening just after the COVID period and everything, there wasn't, for the table at least, there wasn't a concern that they would not meet what they had to meet on behalf of the council. And when that average, you wrote, Dennis, when that average was taken, you think, what are these people doing? So I had no concerns when I read it. I thought, too serious. I can remember the stuff coming up, but I thought the two serious complaints, and I have, I want to compliment Dennis and his team and Daniel for the work that they had done up to date, and I have no concerns that they are doing the work that they needed to do to, one, meet the standard, and two, to produce the work that we would expect of any of the staff for the council. So I'm really pleased to hear the report. And I'll just congratulate you.
I concur. You got thrown in the deep end when a certain gentleman left a couple of years ago, and basically had the audit pretty much straight away. So yeah, 2 years, mate, you turned it around pretty fast. Well done.
Any other comment?
Yes, so just my comment would be just in the next accreditation. So does that mean after this that you've cleared everything, you have to have another what do they call it, a special assessment March next year still?
Yeah, well, that's what they're saying, and that's what they said in their email. But what I'm saying is, I just said it a minute ago, we need to go back and challenge that.
Yes.
I personally think that this is not an Irons issue. I think Irons is doing very well, and they've been very good to work with. And Irons with our food hygiene, because they did the same thing, were very good to work with. I think this is being pushed by MB and a certain guy that is with MB, and we need to go back to Irons and MB and sort it out.
Conversation.
Interestingly enough, the group manager for MB that's in this department now is an ex-Matamata-Piako District Council employee.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
David Hall used to be the area manager here and there, and now he's just become area manager for this unit in Ministry of Business Innovation Employment that deals with all this stuff. So I will be having words with David as well.
Yeah, well, I guess the thing is, it's been frustrating, and I do commend you for your positive attitude, because it is, when you've got auditors in your space, it is a little bit, you can take it as being quite threatening, because they're viewing your work sort of thing, and it is a challenge, especially with the frustration around this. But anyway, onwards and upwards, and hopefully the pressures come off with meeting the 20-day target. And I guess that's the thing around doing the paperwork as well, and meeting that 20-day target, because this is what they're looking at. Your technical work's fine, it was the supporting paperwork, and that's always the challenge, isn't it? Because you've got to do the paperwork as well.
Well, that's the thing with processing. It is just a stock standard residential house today takes between 6 and 8 hours to process. That's if it's without any referred information. So it pretty much takes up a whole day just to do a small residential house.
We used to do them in 40 minutes.
Yeah, and that's the reality, isn't it? It's compliance, regulation. It is more complicated, and and council's the last man standing. So if you don't do a good job,
that's it, and that's what we try to achieve, is to do the best that we can, so that we don't leave council open for whatever.
Just a general question: what happens if you can't issue a COC because the person involved won't do what you want them to do? Does it just close?
So when it comes to 24 months under legislation, if there's stuff outstanding, we just need to refuse the CCC. That's pretty much what happens. And that's where, if you look at the serious non-compliances and stuff like that, that's where we had on the lapsing of consents. I mean, we would have received an extension of time later after the 12-month period actually come past that 12-month period. And we thought, because it was never really picked up before, that we're okay, but we're not okay. But we want to change and we want to make it better. We want to keep on improving as a unit, but I also know that from the quality manager in the cluster, the drive is there to make it better and not say, oh, we're okay now, we can sit and just relax the ride or enjoy the ride. They want to make it, keep on making it better and keep on improving.
It'd be pretty harsh if they won't do what you want and it's still on your books. So after 12 months, to be reflective in your stats would be suck really.
Given the problem is this, we've got old, what we call legacy consents since 1993, still in our strong room.
Oh.
Yes. And that's, I mean, 2 years ago, we very much got pinned for that by irons because we've never sent out the 2-year letters or the 24-month letters. But we can see now with the letters getting sent out between 5 and 15 a month, we can actually see that people actually start booking inspections and so that we can get it sorted. You know.
Or they come to sell their house and find they haven't got their CCC and suddenly it's our fault for not giving them one.
Surely not, Dennis.
No, good work.
Great work, team. So I'm going to ask the committee for a mover and a seconder to receive this report. Joanne is moving and Kevin is seconding. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And on behalf of the committee, great work. And also great work, committee, in terms of the questions that you've asked us. Oh, thank you for asking that question. So I don't need to say well done, team. Excellent.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Dennis, can I just ask whether Leslie's report on risk management 8.10, it's taken as read that if
Yes.
there are any questions, are there any questions on the risk report? No, okay, just keeping that. Thank you very much.
All right, and as I say, I apologise for Leslie not making it here, but
I think
it's been quite an emergency. So
She's got a few things to deal with.
Yeah.
Our thoughts are with her and that. Thank you. And we'll move on to 8.5, the update on organisational culture, which is Kelly, who I think is joining us online. Kelly.
Morning.
Over to you in relation to 8.5 on the organisational culture, and the committee is being asked to receive this report.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for allowing me to come in online today. As you can hear, I'm a little bit under the weather today. In this report, it's a yearly or annual update on our staff climate, and we've just recently undertaken our staff climate survey. As you would have seen in the report, our results were an average of 67%, down slightly from last year of 69%, but we were 21 out of 54 councils. And what we've just recently found out, which I didn't put in the report because we've only just found it out, is that the spread of results was actually 72 was the highest that any council had achieved, and 46 was the lowest. So being 67 and 21 out of 54 was pretty good, given that highest amount of 72. So that was really encouraging. I guess you would have seen here in the results there in terms of that table, and apologies, there's an extra table that got inserted into the report that shouldn't be there, the one with colours, it's duplicated some data. But you would have seen in there that we've got some really good results, particularly around harassment, and that staff feel that they can basically report bullying and harassment without any repercussions, and that's gone up by 15%. So that's excellent for us because it's something that we have been working on as an organisation over the last few years. We've been putting all our staff through preventing bullying and harassment training, and we can see those results are really paying off. So we've got a really good culture in terms of it's not tolerated whatsoever, which was our aim. We've also got really good results in terms of staff and how they feel about working at MPDC, and that is a great place to work, which is always encouraging. As you'll see, our lowest scoring question was around learning and development, and that was to be we can understand that because we actually decreased that budget last year due to some budget cuts, but we also dealt with learning and development from a strategic perspective. So it did mean that staff weren't able to go to conferences as much as they would have liked, but what we did do was we really focused on some areas that we wanted to make some difference in, such as leadership, preventing bullying and harassment, and a whole lot of other different things that we felt would make a difference to our organisation. So all of our leaders have now had some leadership learning and development, which we deem to be very important. So yeah, it's been a real focused approach, which has been great. And then this year we'll be able to do things in a slightly different way. Just in terms of those results that come through, what we do now is we send those out to staff, and we have just recently sent them out to managers, and we've come up with some plans in which to address some of those issues, and we're seeking feedback from our staff around those issues if they've got any other ideas. So, even for example, we saw a drop in some of our results around people understanding the future of MPDC at the moment, and that's to be understandable. We've got reforms on the table at the moment, and we're going through an organisation review. So we get that, and we can acknowledge that, and keep making sure we keep people informed. So I guess all in all, there were no surprises what came through from that survey. You'll also see I've just given you a brief update on some of the other work that we're doing as a team, in particular around our Hōora wellbeing strategy. So that's a strategy that we're focusing on at the moment. It's around mental health, and it's based on two frameworks basically, and we'll come and talk to you a little bit more about that later on once we've gone through the consultation process in relation to the psychosocial critical risk. And also vision and values, we've reviewed how we promote those within the organisation, and that all of our managers raise them at their team meetings now. They get some really good examples and they share that at the management group so we can celebrate success. So that's been a new way to deal with vision and values. And also just one of the issues that we had as a result of reviewing our flexible ways of working policy, we had a concern around how our staff might remain connected if we've got more people working from home and in different locations. So you'll see we're doing some work in that space as well, in particular with an internal comms officer, and working on some events and keeping people informed. And one of the great initiatives that's been put in place is what we call a hot topic Zoom session. So on a regular basis, we have a drop-in Zoom session where people can come along and hear about the latest update, whatever that might be, whether it's to do with reforms or anything else that we think is interesting. And then you'll also see that our strategy that we'll be working on is DEI, which is diversity, equity, inclusion. So yeah, I guess over to you if you've got any questions.
That's an awesome summary of the report. Thank you very much for that. And shame to hear that you're not very well, but very happy that you're staying where you are and we are where we are. Adrian's got some questions.
You always have to ask questions, don't I, Kelly? I guess there's always some work-ons, which is good, and I guess if we were 67 and still way down at 21, there must have been a lot between 68 and 71 or whatever, 72. I guess the question that I would have from a governance perspective is there anything that we as a governance group can help with this? Because some of these things might actually be part of how we impact on staff and their performance as well, with some of the decisions we make. Is there anything, is there any feedback that you can offer from the government to the governance perspective, side of things as to how we, might impact their...
Yeah, that's a good question.
Going.
Yeah, because this is the thing, it's our relationship and the journey that we're on. And I wonder, obviously governance and management, it's two different things, but, if there's any suggestions there that you might have that might help, if there's any feedback that they give, offer, that it might, how we impact on how people feel about their jobs too, just to understand that a little bit. It's about continuous improvement for us all, not just for management. Probably what I'm saying.
Absolutely, and that's something we can certainly keep an eye on and feed back to you. There's nothing that springs to mind. As you can see, we've got some staff have a feeling around the reputation with ratepayers, and I'm guessing that that's to do with we've seen a lot more kind of conflict coming through in terms of how our customers are dealing with our staff, and whether that's just a sign of the times at the moment in terms of people feeling pressured with the economic environment, and other things like that. But I guess what that's translating to is that staff feel that our reputation has gone down a little bit. But that's something that we're looking at addressing as well through our organisation review, how we might deal with that from a customer-centric perspective. But there's nothing else that really kind of jumps out to me at the moment, but it's certainly something I'll keep in mind.
Because I guess that I'm sort of thinking around the opportunity of communicating with our community, and just as the mayor, how I could, sort of support the staff. And now, like when we back our staff and things like that, and talk about them being as part of the community, and I'm quite happy to explore that in some way to be supportive. I really want to, be supportive of staff and their work, because they do take pride. I think that's the thing that we need to acknowledge. Is proud to work for the council, but that reputation is tough at the moment.
Excellent, thank you. I'll take that on board.
I might just add to that as well and come back to a point that you made earlier, which was around building understanding. And so a lot of our staff members here in the community, and without even realising it, they're having those conversations at the dinner table to build that understanding in terms of the position that council's in. Right? So the more that they feel on board with the changes as well, the more that they can be your strongest advocates in the community. But in terms of generic comments, it was heartening to see the positive results overall, and to see that on the whole, the lower scores, although they were still low, a lot of them have improved since the previous year. So yeah, so that's fantastic. Any other comments from the committee?
I was just going to say, there's a little bit of an oxymoron happening here. Awareness of the harassment policy went down 9.
Yes, I saw that.
But feel they can report harassment without repercussions went up 15.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of an oxymoron.
That was the one that struck me.
Yeah.
Well, they feel they can report it without having the understanding of the policy.
Without knowing what the policy actually says. Yeah. So I guess that just suggests that they're comfortable in their environment without having to know the specifics. But yeah, just thought it was a bit strange.
I'm happy to move that recommendation if nobody else to.
I'll second. Yeah, and Joey seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Kia ora. We're moving on to 8.5, which is update on organisational culture. Again, thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. So this is just the
my apologies, as transformation team update.
That's right. So as we've reported to you before, we do have a team involved in transformation. So I won't go through all of that just yet at this point in time. What we have got in the report is the latest update. So in particular, Three Waters, as you will be aware, things have changed in that space. So what we had been working through was the consultation phase with our staff in terms of their pathway to the NTU. So we had been doing a whole lot of work in that space, making sure our staff got the letters, that they were kept informed. We had to do the consultation process with those that were 29% and below involved in Three Waters. The NTU did the consultation process for those that were 30% and above, and that they contacted them directly. So we worked through that process. It was quite a major process. The issue we then have is that they've obviously changed things in terms of the April announcement. And now staff aren't going to receive the result of that pathway for some time. It's been delayed a little bit. So I guess it's a little bit of a blow to our staff, but we are trying to keep them informed as much as possible. And that's the whole idea of having this team, making sure that we've continually got our finger on the pulse, keeping our staff informed, passing on any information that we've got, and just helping them to deal with any uncertainty. So one of the really good things that the NTU are doing at the moment is they're offering some free training, and we've actually opened that up to all our staff around change. So we're encouraging our staff, particularly those in Three Water space, to go to that. And there's also change leadership training as well that we're encouraging our leaders to go on. So that's coming up very soon. So we just keep things ticking along in that space and keeping them informed. In terms of the RMA, that's pretty straightforward. Not too much happening in that space just at the moment, other than the submission that got put in. And then obviously there's a lot of work going on in terms of our Takatu Anamata Future Ready Organisation Review project that's underway. So as you would have seen here in the report, it's quite a different process to how we normally do our organisation reviews, and that we've started off by actually talking to our staff and getting information from them. So it's based on co-design principles. We've asked them questions around what might our community look like in the future if we're at the top of our game, what issues and gaps do we have, what are we doing well, and how might we do things differently. And we've sought a whole lot of information from them. We also gave them an opportunity to tell us what they think the structure might look like before we even come out with a proposal. So it's really quite different to how we've done things in the past. And I think it's gone quite well from that perspective. We have got loads of data that we're working through. So for example, the organisation design tool gave us 4,072 lines of data alone to work through, but we have got a data analyst doing that work, which is very helpful to us. And at the moment, we're just working on drafting the high-level organisation design, which will be going out very soon for consultation. So there'll be 2 rounds of consultation for that high-level org design, which will go down to 3rd-tier managers, and then there'll be a more detailed organisation design, which we'll also consult on, and the timeframe for which is after the election we'll have the final announcement. So it is quite a long process, but we're doing a very detailed process, giving everyone an opportunity to have their say. We have not gone through a major review since 2011, so this is pretty significant for us. And like I said, we're doing things a little bit different this time. Just in terms of managing risk, as we go through this process, we're ensuring that we're able to manage our BAU as all of this additional work is undertaken. We're checking in regularly with our managers about any concerns their teams might have and trying to just basically front foot any issues that might be happening, and using our internal comms officer to really make sure we're touching base with all our staff and providing any support that they might need. So also really encouraging EAP or any other issues or support that we might be able to provide them. So do you have any questions?
Committee members, any questions? I might ask a similar question to what Adrian had in relation to the previous report, which is what added value can this committee provide in relation to the transformation team? I mean, we get the reports, we see what's happening. Is there anything else that you'd specifically like from this committee?
No, I don't think so, unless you had any concerns from a risk perspective that we haven't seen. We do have a risk register, and we think we've been pretty thorough in terms of all the different risks that could result. And that's something we could even share with you if you're interested in having a look at it. We have sought feedback from councillors. We haven't actually sought feedback from you, whether that's something that you'd be interested in. But other than that, nothing else springs to mind.
I think the transformation is a risk in itself. So, I mean, I've got a risk background, so, you know, I'd love to see the risk, but I don't know what the appetite is around the table. So even if there were, these are the most significant risks that are facing the transformation team, and this is what the team is doing in relation to them. I actually think you're doing that in your reporting already, but it might be nice to have it within that more academic way of reporting in relation to risk. And I can see that Buswell Jerry's got a question.
Oh, simply just around some of the issues that I've raised earlier today, and particularly around engagement. I see you've got a comment in the report around engagements with the iwi, and we're going to have some discussions with Don later on. But I think in terms of risk going forward, or understanding the risks, I guess, of some of these sorts of engagements practices might look like with the mighty community going forward. So.
And on the flip side, I see that as an opportunity, right? So engage in that space in terms of what it could look like moving forward. So fine,
I saw the comment too, though, with the iwi trust and CEOs. Has that been held, that the meeting with them, has that been held already? Or am I able to attend to observe what that interaction will look like?
So we had tried to get them together all in the same time in the same room, but that proved mission impossible. So what we've done is we've set up separate Zoom sessions with each of them, and we met with Lisa Gardner, the Ngāti Hawa Chief Executive, the other day online, and had a good kōrero about the sort of relationship at operational level, and it's something I mentioned before, and how that can be improved and how we can be more informed, if you like, in terms of the way staff operate and understand the expectation that staff need to get their head around with regard to the way we operate and the way that we can do so in a manner that's collaborative with the local iwi trust. Now, this is something quite different, obviously, quite distinctly different from the governance connection, the governance relationship. It's having a stronger understanding about how we can operate at operational level with with the primary operational agencies within our area, and that's the 3 trusts. So, yeah, work in progress.
I'm happy to move the report. Can I please have a second? Unless I Gary seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you so much, Kelly, for joining us despite whatever you're going through. Excellent. So next item on the agenda is 8.11, which is the Safety and Wellness Quarterly Report. Kate, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Kate.
Good morning, everybody. So we have the usual problem with the quarterly report being a little bit stale by the time we get to it at this meeting. In fact, not too long till I'll be writing the next quarterly report. So I wasn't going to dwell on that too much. You'll see that I've also included the April update, which I think is probably quite relevant for this group because it focuses on 2 of our key critical risks. Working over near water, we've been in the process of doing critical risk review for that, and I have run a workshop for council already around that. It's been an interesting process. We find that we pick up all sorts of things when we have that quite specific focus on one risk at a site, and we've got a little bit of work to do in that area. I guess that's what always happens when you really focus on something, you see some gaps. Don came out with us to visit one of the sites as part of the risk review, which was great. It's really good, I find, to have people with different perspectives involved in that. So we're just busy working through some of the improvement areas that we've found from that. And that's going to be a work in progress for quite some time because there are a lot of sites that we need to look at. So we're just trying to get the top 4 there, some actions completed for those before we start trying to cover the rest of them. And then on the other side of that, there's also the temporary traffic management. And I guess there I'm really just signalling some changes up ahead with the work that Whakatahi's been doing, starting to come to fruition, but not necessarily affecting us immediately in terms of our role as the road controlling authority, because we still have the option of continuing with the old system, and we'll do that for now. I arranged for somebody from Higgins who does some of the assurance activities in our area for Whakatahi to come and talk to our key managers and contract managers about these changes that are ahead. So we're really just trying to signal early that there's going to be some significant changes happening in the future. The report that you don't have yet is the one from last month. Because of the time frame, again, I couldn't get it done in time for the agenda close, but I will get Stephanie to send that out to you because that is focused on the wellbeing strategy, and I know you're really interested in that. So just to give a little bit of explanation of that, you'll see that the actual strategy is not in the document, in the report. It's because it's still out for consultation, but it does provide the background of what we used when we wrote that strategy, which was some guidance from the Business Leaders Forum, which has been endorsed by WorkSafe, and then also using Te Whare Tapuwha, which I'm sure a lot of you will be very familiar with. And so the strategy as it stands at the moment has got sort of 3 main sections to it. One of them is about designing good work. How do we protect people by making sure that the way we design work is healthy for people? And then looking at how we foster good mental health and well-being within our organisation, and then also if things are going really badly for people, how do we support them in that? So I guess it's a slightly different approach from years ago. We were all very focused on the support when things have gone wrong at the end of the spectrum, whereas now we're focused a lot more on how we make work good for people, and we've used a focus group to do that with people from across the organisation. And that's just gone out to staff at the moment. So I will be sending that report out to you. Does anybody have any questions also about the quarterly report?
Any questions from the committee? From my perspective, good to hear the update in relation to the wellbeing strategy and the focus more on the proactive versus ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. Traditional approach, I would say. Within the report, or the quarterly report, I was concerned to note the abusive behaviour towards customer-facing staff from a number of different avenues, and it's likely happening, I would imagine, in relation to elected members as well, especially with what's going on. So that's of a particular concern to me. Good to see that things are happening in that space, but I can only see they're getting worse. So that's where my concern lies.
Yeah, and funnily enough, tomorrow we actually have an external trainer from a security company coming to run a workshop for council around how to deal with customer conflict and keep themselves safe. For exactly that reason.
It's like a jiu-jitsu tomorrow.
I have to have a disclaimer here and say we didn't opt for the full day one that includes personal safety and self-defense. We do that for our kids, we didn't include that for you.
We'll just carry weapons.
Oh.
That's the application.
So it's good to hear that action is taking place in that space. So thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Otherwise, that's for us to receive the
just one thing, I think, jokes aside, if somebody does get aggressive though, I get that that's going to be addressed tomorrow in the workshop, like physically, you know, do you put a chair in front so that at least slows the person down or whatever, because it is a reality when you watch a lot of the places, people are, you know, like it's hard to discuss
de-escalate something.
De-escalate something when it's right up and you were a little bit afraid of what's happening in front of you.
Yes, and he does cover that in the situation of how you deal with that scenario where somebody's really kind of coming at you and making you feel threatened. It's very hard to plan for every scenario, and that's certainly what we found. I've just been writing some procedures around if we needed to go into lockdown, how we would do that. And as I was talking with my different teams about it, we realised you can't write this perfect plan that says do this, go here, stand there, because really it depends on who's doing what in the scenario. So I think the conversations that we're having are really good though around this. And in fact, I've booked some extra time with the trainer tomorrow to run him through what we're doing in that space.
The only thing that I'd raise, and I'd note that you said it's hard to cover each scenario, but so much of that behaviour comes via social media now.
Yeah.
And so are we proactively taking steps in that space to give people a toolkit for dealing with, you know, one of the obvious things is not to read the comments.
Don't go online.
And my own little rule is not to comment. That, you know, even though when you see something's completely wrong, because what do they say? Well, you know, one comment's a response, two comments is an argument, and they just, I just find it's better to let it go out on its own.
Yeah, I think this council is definitely not responding, and we get staff to do it from its NPDC, that it's not an individual being identified. Yeah, I guess it's just the change in society and how we manage it.
We did have one very active councillor responding to social media, and it, whilst it's his right to do that, it doesn't inflame the situation. So yeah, but social media is a skewed, horrible thing.
So I have asked the trainer to include a little bit about that in the session tomorrow.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing was around the public meetings. That really highlighted it in some ways, and like we all have different levels of personal safety and where we feel threatened or not, and yeah, and that's where different people respond differently, and yeah, because I know at that public meeting in Matamata there were staff were a bit concerned because I had a couple of people come up towards me. I wasn't threatened by them because I knew one of them a little bit, but you know, that's the thing, isn't it? It is around when someone comes towards you, are they going to be more aggressive or is it just words? So it'll be interesting tomorrow.
I guess, you know, making sure that the councillors are okay. you will, of course, will receive certain feedback because you sit in the position you sit in, but I think that even though you're looking for our staff, which is, the priority for you, it brings a question about the safety of anybody representing council in any way to make sure that they're safe. I mean, it could happen to our volunteers even.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where the challenge is around at what point does it become a police matter? Is understanding it, where is it just an idle threat and where is it that it might not be? And that's probably a critical one to, because we've talked about it before. I know previous Mayor Ash did do a post about, a Facebook post on this page, just reminding people that it is not good enough to threaten staff and you'll be referred to the police. So, yeah.
And I'm expecting that to be part of the discussion tomorrow.
Cool, thank you. So I'm happy to move it.
Excellent. Great to hear that that's part of it. Thank you for the report. We have Mayor Adrian moving to it. We have James seconding, and all those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is 8.7, review of council insurance. And, welcome, Richard. And tonight.
Tēnā koutou, e te tia mana, tēnā koe. Let me, if I could introduce my colleague, Roger Lambert. Roger actually manages the insurance side for council and has got significant expertise and experience in the insurance area. So I'll just give you a quick introduction into the report and then we'll basically take it as read and answer any questions. In terms of reviewing our insurance, we've used and referenced a report done by the Office of the Auditor General a number of years ago, where the Office of the Auditor General said that in terms of insuring public assets, there are a range of questions that should be asked. And we thought we've consistently used that framework and asked those questions ever since. This report is a warts and all. Freely admit that we don't have everything sorted. We have valuations of our assets, for example, which are based on our financial values and not necessarily our insurance value valuation. And the the Christchurch earthquakes highlighted the potential extent of difference there. Our risk assessment process for our insurance could improve dramatically. It would be fair to say, when I was reflecting on this report, that the potential changes to our sector in terms of the transfer of some of our assets to other entities was considered potentially a way that our insurance exposure, our risk exposure and our insurance needs would simplify, become less complex. And of course, that's all up in the air. So the biggest driver so far of our insurance changes have actually been premiums. And for example, we looked at some of the risks, uninsured assets, which I mentioned in the report, bridges. And so the committee asked us a number of years ago to go and have a look at that and potential premiums for those bridges. And diving down into that a little bit further and looking at the cost benefit, we worked out that actually our major bridges are actually owned by Matamata-Piako, and that the insurance premiums would be prohibitive. So that drove that decision. We signal on the report that we're potentially looking at another significant increase in material damage insurance next year, which we haven't budgeted for. We've actually said, well, let's go back and review our schedule. Let's go back and look at the assets that we're insuring and whether or not we will actually replace them all. Because we might, and at Roger's suggestion, we consider indemnity insurance rather than replacement insurance on some of those assets, because we're probably not going to, if they are, we do lose them. And I'm thinking about some buildings on council land that are there, but whether they would be rebuilt. No. Just as an example, First Tower, got a number of buildings in our First Tower Museum. So if some of those buildings disappeared, I'm not sure that we would actually replace them. So that again is an example of what's been driving our insurance thinking about how to try and get on top of this insurance, the cost of arising from all the events that have occurred, not only in New Zealand, but in the world. And I guess that's driving us also, and it's not a question we've got on the table at the moment, but it has been asked by a previous committee about self-insurance. And I know some councils do self-insure. They've gone through that exercise, so that's something that we have not lost sight of. We've just not got any immediate work in that area. So it is, as I say, we hope that this report demonstrates its warts and all. Well, we've got the assets that we know are on our register insured and are valued. They're not necessarily the absolute right insurance value. We've always taken a degree of comfort, rightly or wrongly, in the headroom that we have in our balance sheet for debt. So that if we end up being wanting, we've actually at the moment got the capacity to borrow more to cover what our insurance premiums, what our insurance does. Probably a jumbled summary, Te Mana.
Okay, Te Pai. Do we have any, and thank you for that, do we have any comments from the committee? I'm expecting a few.
I just wondering, do we have any human resource insurance? Do we keep personnel or anything along those lines?
Our chief executive.
Key man.
He's our insurance policy. He keeps us, with all due respect, you're right. And that is a policy that you can have. We haven't taken up that policy.
I'd like them.
I guess the question is there's a significant rise in insurance premiums, and I guess it is highlighting the priorities of what must be insured, and I guess what excess. Because that can, if you take a higher excess, you can reduce your premium quite significantly.
That's what people will be going to.
Yeah. But I guess highlighting buildings like the First Tower, is it heritage listed? So what does that mean in respect of it if it was? Can you just give me some context around that?
The actual tower is grade 1, which is inside and outside. The other, I think there's another 4 or 5 listed buildings there, and they're grade 2, which is basically the outside envelope. If we want to do any work to those, we actually have to go through heritage, but there's no compulsion to do anything about it. So you get the unusual scenario where we have to replace it if we want to replace it like for like, or we just walk away and wait for the thing to fall down. One of the things we've looked at here, if you look at the total of those premiums, 50% or more is on building insurance. So that's, if you like, the lowest hanging fruit that we may be able to do something which would make a significant change. And as Bernard rightly said, we go for indemnity, and by indemnity they mean it will finish the demolition of a building, clear the site, throw the grass seed down, walk away. So that is relatively low cost as opposed to rebuilding.
I'll just make a comment that when in doing that process, we come back to this committee, and so we would do exactly what you said, prioritise. So we've got category 1 and category 2 heritage buildings, but then we've got buildings got no, at the First Tower, they have no categorisation. So you'd be able to make that decision.
Yeah, the excess at the moment is generally $10,000 on our buildings insurance. We'll probably have to push it right up to over 100,000 to make any significant difference on the premiums. There's also the scenario generally of some aspects are becoming uninsurable because underwriters will only insure for what may happen, not what will happen. And we've given some notice by August a couple of years ago that's now proved effective. But in California, they no longer would insure for wildfires. They would not take out new policies on wildfires because it happens every year. Same with Australia. If the incidence of cyclones comes more regularly into New Zealand, they will then start with that. I mean, this is more medium to long term. The other thing which may be coming up, which potentially could affect us, is cyber insurance. We do have a policy there. Premiums 4 years ago when we took it out were 5,000. Last year it was 19,000. They may decline to take on additional. And what it actually covers is the resources to help rebuild our system, not get all the information back. So if we have good firewalls, and I know staff get frustrated, and I suspect elected members get frustrated where they can't do certain things going through our network, there are very good reasons. And even though it drives me nuts some days, we actually have a really good secure system, I believe, compared with other councils.
So I guess that comes down to analysing the risk then, doesn't it?
Correct.
And our risk appetite.
Yes.
Again.
It's what's the appetite for risk?
Because it is a significant cost. Like at 834,000, that's the premium of that is, that's 2% on its own.
Yes.
Also, I'm on a trust that leases a building from the council, and we've taken insurance on the building. Do you still have insurance over the building as well?
We take out insurances on the building if council still own it, but not the contents.
Council still owns the building, but we've looked at the building that we did anything. Well, we wanted to insure the building fully. And I wondered on other leased properties, I would think that is a part of their responsibility to make sure they're taking out insurance. So does that say it, or do you have an overall policy about any leased building as well?
We have to specify our list of all the buildings that we insure, but yes, the buildings that we do own are on that list.
Are you referring to the railway?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, we'll just check the schedule, but we typically we insure all buildings we own.
Okay, I wondered if it was like the building is doubly insured.
Oh,
so maybe the other leased buildings are doubly insured. We might be. I certainly know why the council would want to take insurance out of every building, but perhaps in the please don't tell my trust I'm doing this. But in the lease conditions, that might be one of the things you have to insure the building, just so that we can say to the council, someone on the other side, we love that you insure them.
I was actually going to talk about technology changing and the risks involved in that and insurance. You said that we don't insure for the recovery of data. So on insurance, we're doing that with very, very good backups. But yeah, that's a risk for technology stuff. I mean, they're getting attacks are getting more and more frequent. So.
At the moment, we do have cybersecurity insurance. Roger's saying that the market may say that we're not going to provide it because exposure is, as Roger described it, it's not if, it's when.
Yeah.
So your point is absolutely, and we'll report on that later about how we're managing the risk around that. And I think the point was made. It is about risk. It's about, do I try and transfer some of that risk to insurance, or do I improve our own mitigations around that risk?
I know that when you brought Steve to one of the very first meetings that I attended, and he talked about cybersecurity, he said there are things we don't know. We can only plan for what we know. We don't know what other clever person, organisation, what they will invent, and that we have to then insure against that as well.
And he borrows companies for a lot of money.
And that's where my line of thinking was going, because I think we can all in the room understand building type insurance. So, what do you have? Can it be insured? And then what's the premium that we're willing to pay? And coming back to an earlier point, and still be able to pay for our groceries. because that's the key thing that we need to keep in mind. Yeah, we'd like to insure everything to the nth degree, but we can't afford to do that. And it wouldn't necessarily be a wise spend of ratepayer money in doing that. So it's finding that balance. But coming back to the cyber and the insurance space, that's probably one of the least known for us in terms of what does that look like and all the ramifications. So are there any lessons learned, for example, from the Waikato DHB and that process, and then what we might need to do if there was something that similar that happened here?
Yes, there are, Gemma, there's many lessons to be learned. What I will say, and I'll talk about it in more detail when we get into that particular item later, is that the one thing we know is that the environment is incredibly dynamic, that the number of risks and threats is increasing, the complexity of the risks and threats is increasing, and so it's a never-ending process to try and keep ahead of that. One way that we're managing our risk is we're going through a compliance regime that is closer to what is happening in the world than we are, something called sample compliance, and they incorporate in this compliance framework, as risks change, how should the compliance network change or framework change, which therefore comes back to us to say, we now have something new here that we didn't have on our landscape before, and we'll see a little bit of that later on in your meeting, and therefore we change with that. Are we able to change quickly enough? Question. But we're certainly trying to keep pace as best we can with the changing environment. Definitely trying to.
How better we can do, and there's a living and breathing space.
Is there anything else that you wanted to done from the committee? Otherwise, we're going to move.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry.
That's all right. I know we're talking about the risk there. What's caused the significant increase in motor vehicle? We've had a 47% increase there in premium. What have we changed something there, or is that just pure market driven?
It's more market driven, but the way the vehicle insurance works is based on claims history. So in the previous year, this is done through the Waikato LAS effectively, which is 10 councils, and the claims exceeded more than the premium about 2 years ago. So they're in the recovery mode. We did look at self-insuring our vehicles, and we decided not to. I'm not putting my finger on anybody apart from myself. But if you're self-insuring vehicle, bear in mind what that premium, 68,000. All you need is one council truck to knock a supercar into a shop front, loss of business for 3 months. You've got a big payout.
No, I can fully see that. I know where the costs come from. And you say supercar, it doesn't have to be a supercar, just has to be an EV nowadays. But so you've explained it. So it's not from our council, but it's from the combined.
Well, it's shared. We only pay based on the number of vehicles that we've got within our council. It's all pro-rated between the 10 councils.
Yes. No, that's okay.
Yes, there were a few claims. What we have done, we have removed windscreen cover as a separate cover a year ago, because the claims on windscreen cover were less than the premium that was being added for the windscreen cover. So if you're just going to chip, we fund that ourselves out of operational. If the windscreen is damaged due to a vehicle accident that damages the bodywork and it goes above the excess, then the windscreen is covered.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Can I have a mover and seconder, please? We have James moving, and we have Kevin seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you for that report. Reassuring.
Work out like this.
Yeah, exactly. Good play. Lani is here. We have item 8.8 on the agenda, which is the committee review of accounting policies. Welcome, Lani, and thank you, Roger. Kia ora.
So this item was really just a question for you. Do you want to continue having the review of the accounting policies as part of your work, or do you want it to be more focused on seeking assurance from staff that we have undertaken the review?
Seeking assurance. The experts are the people who should be doing the nitty gritty, and we just got to make sure it's happening. So, yeah, great.
Okay, Mike, any other comments?
Yeah, I think it's sensible. It removes another layer of
bureaucracy.
Yeah, that you can just deal with it and give us assurance.
And just in terms of a conversation that Lani and I had about this, we wanted to make sure that it came to the committee in terms of transparency of removing something from the work program. So thank you very much for putting the paper together so that that could happen. And I was hoping that we would land in that space, and it's good to see that we have. So could I please have a mover and a seconder? So we have Kevin moving and Muscle Gary seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you, Nadia. And then I'm guessing you're going to speak to us as well on item 8.9, which is the draft report on KPMG's internal audit on cash handling.
Okay, so this is another example similar to this morning where we've got the reporting quite late in the piece. So we're still working through a process of collating feedback from the different departments. But in the draft report, there was two issues that were discussed with me on the debrief with the auditors that I was concerned about, particularly the security of the safe keys and the access to the safes and that sort of thing. And there was also one about when we have armour guard come to the facilities to pick up the cash. We want the staff to be signing off to say that yes, they're taking the cash, that gives them protection more than anything. So we dealt with those straight away. I went out to the facilities and said this needs to happen ASAP, and they've all responded to that. So I feel like we've covered those off. And the other things I've asked the teams to look at, are they all practical? You get to, if you see in the report, I've provided a breakdown of where our cash comes from. So what's practical for the library, for one of the officers might not be practical for the library, so they need to sort of look at that. There's other things around the point of sale. The auditors recommended that we put in the point of sale systems that provides controls over the opening of the till and that sort of thing. That's just not practical with the financial system that we run at the office, for example. So we'll work through all the practicalities of it and come back to you with where we've landed. There'll be obviously some quick wins we can make to improve things here, and just monitor progress going forward. But really, is there any questions you had?
My question is around: do we have a policy on cash handling? Is there a framework that you?
At the moment, we have a number of written procedures in our framework system. The issue that we have is that every facility has their own one. Yeah. So we're working on inconsistent. Yeah, we're working on having one policy or one procedure that might have some notes for different facilities where something does differ.
Yeah, it'll be good to tidy it up.
Absolutely.
And I guess, is there a trend that there's less cash being handled?
Very much so. I'd love to get to a point where we had no cash.
It's legal tender still,
yeah. We obviously don't use cash at the domain beauty. So yeah, I'd like to get there, but I don't think we've got any time soon.
But it's still good to tidy up the policy because it keeps everybody safe. And yeah, that's cool.
Just in terms of the scope, I recall at a previous committee, we discussed some issues at a particular site and just wondering if there was a reason why that site wasn't included in the scope. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for confirming.
Oh, okay, that was another.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the sense of the recommendations that were raised currently coming through as developing, I'm trying to understand whether if we address all of the recommendations that are there, that's going to shift us to an effective or a good space. And it comes down to the resource that we have, to your point, right? So do we want to spend and invest a lot of money to get a system consistent that receives $4,000 a year versus $100,000 a year? So just making sure that we're taking that prioritisation lens and that approach. Yeah. Right. Any other questions from the committee? So I'm guessing that we're receiving the report. May I have a mover and a second, please? Yeah, must we start moving and seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Okay, carry. Thank you, Danny. It's good to see. It's good to see an area where internal controls are really monitored closely, having an independent review and having some really good food for thought about what we might want to do to improve that space. So thank you to you for getting that done.
The other really good thing was that teams are so keen to improve and make the improvements. So,
Thank you. So the next item on our agenda is 8.10, which is the risk and management update to be taken as read. Unfortunately, we don't have Leslie joining us today, and I'd like to say that she's going to an international destination for a great reason, but it's not as good as we'd like it to be. So our thoughts are with her and her whānau. So I guess the next one is to move on to 8.12 and see if there's any comments. It's taken as read. It's just in terms of the program.
To approve.
Oh, my apologies. We still have to receive the risk management update from Leslie.
So I'll move that.
And yeah, Adrian's moved and by Joe and his seconds. All those in favour, please say aye. Okay, it's carried. The good thing about that risk management report was the focus on risk appetite and tolerance. So I'm quite keen to see that piece of work coming through. The next is 8.12, which is the risk and assurance work program. May I have a mover? We've got two movers, so we'll go with James. And then Kevin. All those in favour, please say aye. Okay, it's carried. I would mention that we need to go in committee now. And Adrian has moved and James has seconded. All those in favour? Okay, it's carried. Go team. And so